The Giants have benched Eli Manning. They're going to go with Geno Smith. Let's bring in 97.3 ESPN.com Eagles and NFL Insider John McMullen, who joins us now. He's brought to you by Geno's, the winemaker's choice for 50 years. Visit GenoPinto.com. And I'll tell you, John, I know that you've kind of been saying that, Geno's better, not Geno's, Geno's the replacement, by the way, Geno Smith replacing Eli Manning, that Eli's better days have been behind him. But is going to Geno Smith really the right decision here for the Giants?
No, that part of it doesn't make a lot of sense. I think we've all seen enough of Geno Smith to know what he is. So I don't have any problem with the evaluation aspect of your team who's out of it, but they have a rookie in Davis Webb. That would probably be the better way to go down the stretch, because you want to see what he has and if he could potentially be an answer to their future quarterback, which I doubt. The next Giants quarterback is probably not on this roster, but it was always going to be a tough decision. I've been talking about it for a while. There's so much goodwill built up with Eli Manning in that organization, the 2 Super Bowl championships. It's very difficult to pull the plug. It is for any organization in any sport. But the reality is Eli Manning isn't Eli Manning. And for some bizarre reason, and you're already seeing it, people are speculating, where is Eli Manning going to start? Is he going to reunite with Tom Coughlin in Jacksonville? Mm-hmm. I was just telling Josh off there, Tom Coughlin's not that dumb. He doesn't want an aging quarterback in the death throes of his career with a good young team. He wants to get better at the position. The reality is he was a borderline Hall of Fame quarterback at one point. He no longer is. He's a below-average quarterback. The Giants found it out in a harsh way this season, along with many of their other issues. He's not the only reason that's a bad football team, but it was time. The timing of it is the strange part, because the Giants don't have anything else. But whether it was going to happen after the season or late in the season doesn't really matter. They had to move on, and they indicated they at least realized that at this point.
So let me ask you this. Does the ownership have to give the okay to the coach for this? And if so, is that an indication that the owner is backing the coach to say, you know what, Ben, we support you, go ahead and do this? Although it sounds like Eli was given the opportunity to start and decided that he didn't want to be in the way.
Yeah, he was given the opportunity to start to keep his consecutive game streak going, which is 210 games, second in history behind Brett Favre. He's been incredibly consistent and durable and able to get out there every Sunday. That's probably the most impressive aspect of his entire career, to be honest. And he declined, and I don't blame him. He's probably feeling a little bit bitter from that aspect. But anytime you make a decision like this, yeah, it goes farther up than the head coach. The question is, the Giants are typically not an organization where ownership gets involved in football decisions. So I don't know if the owner was involved, but certainly Jerry Reese, the GM, was involved. And yeah, you have to get approval for a decision like this. And look, it's becoming clearer and clearer the Giants need a complete reboot. And that's not an organization you normally say that about, because they're usually about continuity. But I don't expect Eli Manning back. I don't expect Ben McAdoo back. And I don't expect Jerry Reese back.
Obviously, with them moving forward here in this situation, do you expect Eli to be back there next year?
No, I don't, for a number of reasons. One, as I just said, I think they're going to shift gears, both from a personnel standpoint and from a coaching standpoint. And if you bring in a new regime, they're going to want to sort of move forward, and they're not going to want an aging quarterback limping to the finish line. They're going to want to go in a different direction, and it starts probably at the top of the draft. I wouldn't be surprised with their first-round pick if the Giants go quarterback. At least early, it's supposed to be a very deep quarterback draft. Now, we always say that, and things tend to change as you go through the pre-draft process, but there seems to be a number of bodies that will be available. The Giants will have an opportunity to take a quarterback. I think that's the most logical direction, but you have to see what they do as far as the GM and coach goes.
I'll talk with John McMullen, 97.3 ESPN.com. It's going to be Geno Smith, who he's 27 years old. You tweeted this. It's a waste of time that Davis Webb was a guy that they drafted.
The other
guy? I look.
When this first came out, I was like, what?
I like Geno. I think he's intriguing. I mean, I don't think he was ever given a really, we saw what Jeff Fisher did with Goff. Similar situation. When you play for Rex Ryan, you're kind of you're not in the most advanced offensive system over there. So maybe Geno hasn't been given a fair shot. I'm not as down on him as many people. He's a punching bag for many people, but even I don't think that that's the right decision to turn to a 27-year-old kind of, cast-off.
No, and that's the strange part. Now, they already said both are going to play, Geno Smith and Davis Webb. So I imagine it's going to be Webb down the stretch, and they'll try to figure out if he's a prospect worth developing. Because, I mean, we've seen enough. And you're right about the Jets in that situation. He could have been put in a better situation with better coaching, and maybe he would have developed in a different direction and certainly would have been a little bit better. But I think at this stage of his career, and we've seen it with a lot of quarterbacks, not just Geno Smith, once you kind of lose confidence in an offense, it's really hard to rescue these guys. You mentioned Jared Goff, but that was very, very quick after his first season, and really he didn't start a lot. So he wasn't inundated in bad habits for years and years, and I think Geno has been. I just don't think starting him makes much sense.
Sports Bash here on 97.3 ESPN. So Geno Smith, I mean, John, at the end of the day, Eli's been a company guy. They did him wrong here, right, by doing this, or is it just that the time and the clock was ticking?
I don't know if they did him wrong as much as, because I think they bent over backwards and they allowed him to say, look, you can keep this consecutive streak going if you wanted. And from his standpoint, as I also get his point of view as a proud guy who's won 2 Super Bowls and has been the face of that franchise for 13 years, I get why he didn't want to do that. But it's very difficult, and I've compared it to the Yankees in the same town with Derek Jeter at the very end of his career. Now, Jeter is much more iconic than Eli Manning and much more in tune to the success of what essentially was a dynasty. But at the end of his career, like almost every great player, by the way, he wasn't very good. And how do you go about that and say, do you replace him? Do you let him play out his career as the Yankees did? Essentially, that's what the Giants were doing. He was, I don't know, I've screamed this from the mountains and no one believes me. He's a bad quarterback. And it's about winning football games. So I really can't blame the organization. In my estimation, they waited too long.
Yeah, were there signs of this in your opinion? Because what was that, 3-4 weeks ago, the McAdoo blamed him for a decision near the end of the game, and everybody went nuts about that?
I thought in a lot of ways the worst thing that could have happened to the New York Giants was last season when they won 11 games, because that was an anomaly. That was a defense-driven team. Their defense carried them. Their offense was terrible. It was, and it wasn't just Eli. It was the running game. It was the offensive line. But other than Odell Beckham Jr., who's a tremendous player, the Giants had nothing on offense for a number of years now. And part of that was the quarterback. But because he had the 2 Super Bowl rings, because he had all the goodwill built up in the bank with that organization, for whatever reason, people didn't see it. And it's not a surprise that this was coming, because it's just he's not what his name would suggest he is any longer.
Yeah, he's a real tough one. I've never had him in that category of people like to use that word elite. I've never really put him there. To me, he's you got to respect his accomplishments. I don't by any means think he stinks. He's won 2 Super Bowls, but the years that they did not make playoff, didn't win a Super Bowl, they didn't even make the playoffs a lot of times. The highs and lows seem to be very up and down for Eli's career. So it makes it very difficult when you have a 2-time Super Bowl winning quarterback and a guy who's been pretty good. I always felt that this was going to be a rocky ending, but I thought he at least handled it pretty well today.
Well, he's a classy guy. He's a very professional guy, always has been. That I will never criticize him for. Mike, I agree with you. I don't think he's a Hall of Fame quarterback. And
No,
it's tough.
no,
When
not
he got
me.
2 Super Bowl rings, I think he's eventually going to get in. But the obvious comparison is his brother, and this is how I describe them. Peyton's like LeBron James. He was just this incredibly consistent, brilliant player, day in, day out. Eli was Vinnie Johnson, the guy who got hot at the right time and looked phenomenal at times, but the consistency from week to week wasn't there. And that's when you see the large spikes, the Super Bowl, and then missing the playoffs, Super Bowl, missing playoffs. His brother was 12 wins, 13 wins, 12 wins consistently.
Yeah.
And to me, that was the difference and why one's a Hall of Famer and one isn't.
By the way, there's some video out right now. This is from Pat Leonard of the Daily News. Eli virtually in tears talking to the media today. This is 8 minutes ago. He's literally fighting the tears back, almost crying that he's realizing that I might be at the end of the line, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's tough.
I got to be honest, though, even if you're not a big Eli guy, this is a pretty demonstratively disrespectful thing by that organization, to me anyway, from a coach who is not on solid footing to begin with. I still don't understand how the ownership group has allowed them to make a mockery of the situation like this, even if you think it's the right decision.
When you're 2-9, I mean, the best case scenario in this type of situation is to just play out the season with Eli and then move on after the season, which is what I would have advised them to do. When you're Ben McAdoo and Jerry Reese, and I can only try to get into their heads and speculate what they're thinking. My thought, they know their jobs are on the line. So what they want to do is prove that maybe, say, if Davis Webb shows a spark in the last month of the season, that maybe it wasn't their fault.
If you told me it was Davis Webb, I would have a much better time coming to terms with
I don't understand. I don't understand starting Geno Smith. I said that right away.
No, absolutely.
If it's Davis Webb, I have no issues with it whatsoever.
I would agree. And I brought this up a couple of weeks ago that, if you're the Giants, you're eliminated. Most organizations who are eliminated, they start to take a look at the future in another direction. How old's Eli? 37?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think 36, but somewhere in that range.
Right. So,
yeah,
most places, the fan bases are saying, look, you got to start moving on and turning ahead. The 2 Super Bowls, I think, make the people want to hold on to Eli a little bit more.
36. He's 36.
Okay, and some would say, look, he's not the problem. Their receivers are dropping a lot of passes. Their offensive line is a mess. That if you gave Eli weapons and a better line, that he still, could be the guy that leads them to where they want to go. Fine. But to be in a situation where you're out of the playoffs with a 36, 37-year-old quarterback, how many more great years do really people have? That would be in a normal situation. This is not a normal situation with where this team is and really what they have behind him. That's really the problem. They don't really have a credible alternative behind them because they haven't, much like the Chiefs, drafted a Patrick Mahomes in the first round, much like the Eagles did with Donovan McNabb. They went and got Kevin Cobb in the second round and really were waiting for the moment to hand the thing over to him. So Eli has not had the injury issues or that problem to have that moment to kind of wait for him to break down.
No, and as I said, it's always difficult once you have an icon of your organization and it's clear they're slipping, because it happens to everybody, no matter how good you are. And there are people holding out hope, and I've seen it on Twitter.
Yeah.
Believe me, people have yelled at me that said, if you give them running backs and the Giants would be good. It's not the case, and that's why I said, people are already speculating. Jacksonville, which has this tremendous defense but needs a quarterback, and obviously Tom Coughlin is there. It's not going to happen. They're not that dumb. Tom Coughlin didn't get to this point in his career, and it's not trying to be disrespectful. It's just realizing where he is in his career.
Well, you don't look at Jacksonville maybe as a Denver situation that had this great defense and just needed a guy at the end of the line.
Good point.
That
Squeeze a year out of him.
Much like his brother that just came in and...
Yeah, I do. And if they had a quarterback like that, I would advocate it for. But Eli's not his brother. He's not that guy, and that's what I'm trying to impart. He's not that guy. He's not that quarterback that can come in. Remember, Peyton was essentially done physically when the Broncos won Super Bowl 50. But remember what he was when they were in the Super Bowl before that with Denver. He was the first guy in NFL history to lead an offense to scoring 600 points. He had 50 touchdowns when they lost to the Seahawks in the MetLife Stadium Super Bowl. He was still one of the best quarterbacks in football. The questions with him at the time were about the neck injuries and the multiple neck surgeries. Peyton Manning was still an MVP-level player when he was healthy. Eli's not that guy. He never was that guy. What he was an above-average quarterback, solid guy, as I mentioned, who got hot at really good time. And he deserves credit for that, by the way, because it's not easy to do that. But what he isn't is the savior or a guy who's got one more or two more MVP-like years. This guy was never in the MVP conversation at any point of his career. He was not his brother.
I can agree with that, definitely. I was never, this Eli is, a super franchise guy. I certainly, again, he's a very tough guy to kind of chronicle with those two Super Bowls. And he's a big part of those two Super Bowls.
Two-time MVP.
Yeah,
that's the thing.
You throw that into the mix. So he's got that on one side. But, again, the non-Super Bowl years are not playoff years. I mean, there's a lot of – how many times has Eli not made the playoffs in his – how many years has he been in the league? 04, he got drafted.
Well, 04. Carson Wentz was 11 years old, I think, the last time Eli Manning didn't start a game for the New York Giants.
Yeah, I saw all kinds of stats about that, John. Like George W. Bush was a couple weeks into office when Eli Manning, and it was Patrick Ramsey who started for the Redskins when they played each other that year. That was the quarterback. The last time Eli Manning wasn't the quarterback for the Giants.
A couple things. By the way, check out John's Eagles coverage at 97.3 ESPN.com. Anything stand out from the coordinators today who both spoke?
Well, I think Jim Schwartz obviously was, sort of the headliner because of what the Eagles were able to do defensively against the Bears. And in typical Jim fashion, as I predicted, because I asked him about the defensive line, which is just unbelievable, and it's been playing at such a high level, and he defaulted to basically – he didn't say the gold star, but he said, they've been pretty good to this point. But we haven't accomplished anything, essentially, and it doesn't mean anything. So the Eagles have been really on message, if you want to talk about it from a political standpoint. They refuse to look ahead. They only look at the opponent ahead of them. And obviously, behind the scenes, it's probably different, but they've been very good about staying on message and not talking about the playoffs, not talking about the number one seed or anything of that nature.
John McMullen at JF McMullen on Twitter. Follow him there. And also he has a NFL column up today regarding the you still have your necklace around your neck there, John?
Did you tape it down?
Yeah, I didn't run into a key to lead, so I still got it.
What's the story? I mean, these two guys have been going at this. This isn't the first time Talib went after Crabtree's necklace. In fact, he got it last year.
Yeah, he got it last year, and they were and Crabtree was angling for a fight. Remember, this was early in the game, and the play before, Crabtree punched Chris Harris in the stomach, and then went after Talib. So, look, this was a situation, and Jack Del Rio was upset because this is a new precedent for the NFL. They generally don't do this when guys are ejected. They generally don't suspend them because it serves as a suspension, missing the game, and they gave him 2 games. But they had to. I mean, what those two players did, it had to be stopped, and a message had to be sent. And John Runyon, who was obviously the old Eagles right tackle, is in charge of those punishments now, and he laid the hammer down.
By the way, Eli has 6 playoff appearances in 14 years. That's 8 times.
Consistency, just not there.
Just not enough.
So
8 missed playoff appearances. That's why I don't put Rivers. We talk about that class of 04.
Okay.
I don't have Rivers in that in that category either. Just too many times they haven't been able to get to the playoffs. Roethlisberger, though, to me, he's in. He's to me, he's different.
Yeah, he's a Hall of Fame quarterback, no question. I've always thought Rivers is borderline because he's so spectacular throwing the football. And by the way, while I say I don't think Eli is a Hall of Fame quarterback, and that remains a true statement for me, I think he will be a Hall of Fame quarterback. I think there's no doubt
membership
has
will
let
privileges.
him in because of those 2 Super Bowl titles. And I say the same thing about Kurt Warner because of now Kurt Warner. My arguments with him are longevity.
Yeah. I was not a voter. I would not have voted for Warner myself.
Yeah, when he was at the top of his game, though, he was spectacular.
We think alike on everything but the Sixers there, pal. I had a guy come up to me the other day. He said, now you tell McMullen. I said, I'm not telling him anything. He's allowed to believe whatever he wants.
Yeah, it's tough to tell me things, as you know. I'm pretty headstrong.
All right, man. We'll catch up tomorrow.
Good stuff, John.
All right. Thanks, guys.